All right, man. It's plainly obvious. It's written all over your face. Your patience is drawing thin, right? God promised you this. He said he was going to create that. He said he was going to move that. God said he was going to heal that. And you don't see it, right? And you've been patient and you've been faithful and you ain't killed nobody and you've limited your road rage episodes to 1 a week, right? You've been good. Then why don't you see what God has promised? Well, we're going to talk about that today, man. What's going on? What's the problem, right? Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe you don't understand that God prepares for what he creates. Let's talk about it, man. One love. Sometimes back, man, I made two videos about the hindrances to receiving from God, right? I said that there was two reasons why, right? One was understanding your responsibility, not knowing what to do. There is something for you to do in the creation, in receiving from God, and not knowing your responsibility could be one of the hindrances of the manifestation of what God has promised you. Number two was the unwillingness to suffer. Unfortunately, part of the process of receiving from God is discomfort. There's discomfort in everything that God has created, and everything that God is trying to get to you. There is some type of discomfort, and because we are unwilling to suffer, we are unwilling to experience some discomfort, that could be part of the reasons why you don't have what God has promised you. Well, today we're going to talk about one more thing, not necessarily a hindrance, but we're going to give you a little bit more understanding of the process of God's creation, right? Once you understand that there's a process and understand that process, right, then there will be a little bit more command in your possession, right? Once you've taken care of your responsibility in the process, done what you need to do, right, and you've submitted yourself to whatever discomfort this creation will bring, right? Then you just need to know, where am I in this process, right? It's kind of like being lost in the parking lot looking for your car, like me, right? I don't care what anybody says, man. Satan moves my car. I don't care what anybody says. It's never where I put it. It's always over there. And if you understood where you were in the parking lot, right? I'm in parking lot D, and having some indication, some indicator where you are in the parking lot, then you'll know, okay, how far you're away from your goal. How far are you away from what God is trying to do? How far away are you from your car, right? So that's what we're going to give you today. We're going to give you the process of God's creation so that you'll know where you are in that process. Turn to Genesis, the first chapter. Genesis, the first chapter. I know that's a tough book and chapter to find, but I have faith in you. I have faith that you have the capabilities to be successful in the tedious task of finding Genesis, the first chapter. All right, so as usual, I'm not going to read the entire chapter, right? I'm just going to focus on certain verses that helps me create the point that I'm trying to get across to you. All right, so Genesis, the first chapter, and we're going to read the third verse. Genesis 1 and 3, and it reads as follows. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So I thought it would be a good idea if we're going to try to understand the creation process, is that if we found an instance in which God is creating, I felt that would be helpful, right? If we found a time where God is creating, focused on that process, then we would understand the process of God's creation, right? Hence Genesis 1. Genesis 1 is actually called the creation story. Kind of apropos, right? So in Genesis 1, in the third verse, we find God creating light, right? One of the misconceptions about this verse is that when God said, let there be light, most people believe he's creating the sun, right? But that's not what he's doing right here. God doesn't create the sun until the 16th verse. Let's look at it. Genesis 1 and 16. And God made two lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So the greater light is referring to the sun. The lesser light is the moon. So God created light, and then later on he created the rulers of the light, right? And another thing that was interesting to note about this is that nowhere in the creation story do you find God saying, let there be darkness, right? There was no creation specifically of darkness. The verse says that God said, let there be light. Later on, it says he divided darkness from light, which means that in the beginning, light and darkness were either one or connected, right? Because it said God divided the two, right? You can divide something that's whole, like a pie. You can divide a pie, or you can divide what's connected, like Siamese twins, right? So light created darkness, and either light and darkness were one, or light and darkness were connected, which in all honesty, man, creates a plethora of other topics, and that would blow your mind. But I'm not going to discuss those today, right? So what we see is a pattern in this thing. God said, what God said became, and then God creates something else, right? Let's look at another verse that depicts that process again. All right, let's look at the 6th verse, Genesis 1 and 6, and it reads as follows. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmaments, and divided the waters which were under the firmaments from the waters which were above the firmaments. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, verse 9, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Right? Let's jump to the 20th verse. All right, Genesis 1. Now we're looking at verse 20. And it reads as follows. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw it was good. Have you found the pattern? Have you found it? Have you seen it? God creates light. Light creates light and darkness. God called the light day and called the darkness night. Later on, God created the moon and the sun. Right? God created the firmaments. God created the heavens and the earth. Then later on, he placed the firmaments in the heavens. And then later on, he created all the plants and animals that goes on the earth. God created the sea. And then later on, he placed the water animals in the sea. The pattern is that first, God creates the environment first, and then he places what belongs in the environment in that process. God created light first, that which created light and darkness. Then he created that which ruled over it. Right? He didn't create them all at once. He didn't create light and day at once and then place the moon and stars all at once. There was a process. Okay, so the environment must be created. Then that which goes into the environment can be created. That's the process. So now we need to ask ourselves, where are we in that process? At what point are you in that process? All right, God has promised you sun and the moon. And you're wondering, where is this sun and the moon that God had promised me? Is it possible that the environment in which the sun and moon is assigned is not conducive, is not ready yet? In the process of God creating the sun and the moon in your life, maybe there is no sun and there's no moon because God, in the creating of the environment process, God is still separating light and day. Maybe God is still creating the environment for that sun and the moon that He's promised for you. Maybe your environment is not conducive yet for what God has promised to create in your life. God has promised you a wife. Maybe the environment for that wife has not been conducive, has not become conducive for her yet. If God went ahead and gave you that wife, possibly you're still reminiscing on, hey man, I wonder what Kiki and I would have been if we stayed together. I wonder where's that black book I had, and you're reminiscing through your black book about all the concubines that you've had, right? That's still in your mind. That's still in your heart. The environment for a wife is not quite conducive for her yet, right? Maybe you've come out of a family of abuse. And if God placed that wife in your life, you would continue that generational curse of abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, maybe even physical abuse. The environment right now, you're still hanging on to the old times. Maybe you're not mentally mature enough. Maybe you still have memories that you haven't loosened. Maybe you still have pictures of that ex-girlfriend. Maybe you still have memorabilia when you went to Cabo and Jamaica and acquired many a concubines there, right? The environment for the wife, the firmaments isn't quite created yet. The waters, they are not quite separated yet. The dry land that comes out of the waters hasn't quite shown up in your life yet, right? You're trying to be an entrepreneur. You're asking God, where is this business that you've promised me? But yet you're still hanging around people who break the law. You're trying to be a respectable businessman, but you're hanging around people who aren't even trying to get a job, who aren't even trying to look presentable when they go out. You're trying to lose weight, but you're hanging out with women, your friends, who can't even control their eating habits. Maybe the environment in which God is trying to create those things in your life is not conducive. Check your environment. Survey your environment. It will never show up. It will never show up if the environment is not conducive. And finally, man, ask yourself, okay, it's still not here. What God has promised me is still not here. My business hasn't shown up. My husband hasn't shown up. My $1 million hasn't shown up. Why have I not seen the creation of God in my life? Well, another question to ask is, did God say, let there be? Did God say that he would? A lot of times in our excitement about creating things in our lives and obtaining things in our lives, it's easy to misconstrue our own voice for God's. Maybe it hasn't shown up because God didn't say, let there be. Maybe you said, let there be, and you thought it was God. You've convinced yourself that it was God. Maybe this whole thing is your idea. Maybe this is something that you thought up. Maybe this is something that you created. Maybe you're going about the creation process yourself. God didn't say, let there be. God says. God creates the environment, and then he places what belongs in that environment. Where are you in that process? Either God didn't say, let there be, or the environment is not conducive for what belongs in it. These are questions you got to ask yourself, man. These are reasons why possibly God has not delivered you what he's promised. All right, man, I got to go. Hope you're getting this, man. Hope you're understanding what I'm saying. I say it every week. I mean it every week. Thank you for showing up. My name is Jeff Staten, and this is Pressing Toward the Mark. One love.